Hello Harry, here's your video feedback for part 1 of the animation simulation module. I've had a good look through your blog, not your blog rather, your PDF document there, and I'm very pleased with that, but I will come back to that in more detail in a moment. I've got your video clips all loaded up and Maya's loading in the background, so let's make a start. Okay, so with this, immediately I can see there's a little bit perhaps too much pulling and tugging around some of the clothing here for the neck. I mean, I don't mind there being a little bit of that, but I think for that neck area it's a bit too much. However, for the arms, I've been very impressed with the creasing that you managed to get to work, particularly around the elbows and around the shoulder. Very pleased here that we do see articulation without it dragging the hair and things. I did say in class that I'm happy for you to hide the hair away if you wanted, so it's been a bold move to keep the hair in there. And you've actually done a good job of it. I do see around here there's probably a little bit too much pushing of the bicep area when we see the elbow articulate. The other thing to remember is when you're doing kind of a demo of this, particularly a range of motion, is remember how the shoulder area does functions, anatomically speaking. When your arm comes up towards the T-pose, then it's all to do with the kind of the shoulder point here of the bone, the pink bone we see there. Anything beyond that T-pose upwards should articulate about this point. So there's some bits there where you're articulating the joint. It's probably going just a little bit beyond that, so it makes it look a bit poor. I don't think it is poor. Actually, I think you've done a very good job of skinning it. But just be careful about when you're demoing this, articulating the right joint. Make sure you do that. Okay, let's continue to move on. Okay, that bend's good. Think of this with clothing. You need to make sure that clothing's not stretching, which is very difficult to do because you want the clothing to pull and move but not stretch, and that's quite a difficult thing to do. Unless you've got stretchy clothing like, this dress might be. It might be kind of a stretchy, pliable, flexible sort of material, but certainly this denim material wouldn't stretch as such, it'd just pull around. So I think you've done a decent job of that. There's a little bit of flexion of it, but it's not so bad. Now I'm interested here really to be seeing the knees and things, so always make sure when you're demonstrating things that you show a good side view, a good side camera view, but they are working properly. That's better. They are working properly. There's a good little bit of flexing going on in there. There's a decent crease of the leg. I'm pleased with that. I'm happy here with the foot moves as well. I like the fact that you've got that little flap side there of the folded over element of the boots is moving with the boot, but the sock's not really moving the boot. Which is good. There's probably a little bit of stretching of it there, which again is fine because the sock would do that. So again, it articulates well. Now, I'm pleased that you did get these to articulate properly. There's a nice movement of the dress there as well. I like that. Okay. I mean, I would recommend, when you're working through the foot there, make sure we see the toe roll as well. That's one of the key things I did ask you to work on. But it looked like the hip worked. You saw that well. Nicely demonstrated. That's good. That works nicely. A nice controller for that as well. I do see that with your hand controller there, you've had a go at you've had a go at a splay control and also a fist kind of clench control. I like the fact that with that, I'm just going to pop back actually. Bear with me a second. I think this is all been strangely ordered perhaps. I do like the fact that with your hand controls, you have got your controls which are very close to the hand itself. And notice with this hand control here, if I can stick it back slightly, you have got the possibility of, bending backwards as well as kind of forwards into the fist. Again, it adds flexibility to your rig. It looks to me like they're all articulating appropriately. So the rotation of those fingers and the thumb is appropriate to the mesh. I'm a little bit concerned about the positioning of some of the bones there. I think if I just run this back a touch, it looks like there's a weird positioning of the thumb there, but it does work. It may not be lined up right, but it looks like you've done a good job of skinning it to make sure it actually does articulate properly. I think there's a little issue probably around this knuckle point of the thumb, You see like there's a little bit of a weird sort of flex thing going on here. So it kind of losing a little bit of its form there. So this is something you can perhaps tidy up. But that said, that's a pretty good attempt. So let's move on to your animation of this. It's a good sort of range of motion type test as well. So you're trying out a little bit of everything. It's going to zip that back. Now this is a case in point of where you should really be rotating this shoulder at the clavicle. Not this particular point, but when we see these arms lift, it might be a struggle for me to get it to the right point. There's a good point. So you can see the arm there, it's gone just slightly beyond sort of what you consider to be like a T-pose sort of position for the shoulder. And this is the bit where you should be rotating it via the clavicle. I mean, you know, I'm not marking the animation, but I mean, if you animate it correctly, then it gives a better presentation of the rigging that you've done. Okay, so yeah, a good animation. I think all told, I think you've done a very good job of the full figurative character rig. I'd like to have seen the toe roll working. I'm guessing it does, but you should have demonstrated that. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to nip into Maya. I'm going to load up your Maya file, and then we'll have a little look in there. And here's the file loaded up in Maya. Okay, so first thing I tend to look at when I'm marking this is the shape editor to see if you've done any kind of playing around with blend shapes and things. And also, obviously, I'm interested in the expressions that you've set up. Okay, so it looks like you've set up plenty of expressions in there for the hands, more specifically. I think you may have been able to combine some of these expressions rather than doing them individually. You may have had a single expression just for hand and then listed in there, ring finger, pinky finger, middle finger, and so on, index finger and so on, in one long list. Doesn't really matter, it's got the same effect, but perhaps it's slightly more efficient to have it in one expression. Doesn't really matter. I would recommend, however, you name them appropriately. Now, similar with some of your joints, should be named appropriately as well. So like joint 23, what is that? You know, so name it properly. It's a minor niggle. Okay, so not very clear to me what bits this controls. I'm guessing it will be something like the backs of the knees or something. That's the standard sort of thing that we'd see going on. So it's not the back of that knee, certainly. It's not obvious from here. Again, so what I would recommend is when you're doing these kind of things is name your blend shapes. Just name them, then it's much more obvious what's going on with each of them. Not clear to me what's going on there, so I don't know what these blend shapes are for. Could be the arms. Again, not particularly explicit. I can't tell, but you've got some set up there, but again, it would be useful to know what they're supposed to be. It does look like you've put them in there, but actually not added a target, so perhaps they don't do anything. So shows, I guess, that you've experimented with that, but not perhaps used it. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's in there, and this is the main thing I was interested in. I did want to have a look and see at your at the feet you've got set up, and also see if you did manage to get any sort of foot roll working in there. It doesn't look like the foot roll's working. I can't see it functioning. And that's a shame, because it is one of the requirements of a brief that you get the foot roll to work. So so the bone's working. Probably the skin is not quite right, but the controller for it's not functioning. Again, it's a shame. Again, the brief did ask for it, so it should be there. Okay, the rest of it looks pretty good though, so I'm going to leave that be. So let's have a look at the facial stuff that you've been working on. So I'm going to open up in your facial rig. I'm going to come back to that once I've had a look through the video files. Open VLC back up again. So let's work our way through. So in your files, you've got your range of motion animation for the character. Well, I'm happy that I've seen that already, because I've seen your animation, I've seen what you've done in your demonstration of things. So I'm pretty happy with all that anyway. You know, because again, I do think you did a very good job of this. So I've no real fear that you'd had any issues with that. So That's fine. So let's have a look at this facial stuff then. So looking at this, it's like Maya's crashed, but never mind, I can reload that back up. So you've clearly got a good setup here. I like the fact that you have actually bothered to put a head controller in there, rather than having to grab this central bone you've got in there. So that was a smart move. I like that. Yeah, I mean, even again, something like that, which will move the bone, it gives you that extra flexibility. Some of that is perhaps not anatomically so correct, the kind of movement that you could have in that. But if it gives you the option to be able to do it, the animator can, you know, push things, can exaggerate things slightly if they want to do. So again, that's a good thing. Yeah, I like that. That's good. It looks like you've got a skin tug in there. What is useful also, I will just mention this, you probably can't hear it back on here because I've set it not to play the audio back when I'm playing this back. But obviously you know that you did the voiceover on this. That's really useful for me when I'm marking it, because you're discussing what you've done as you've gone along, and you're discussing, you're perhaps pointing things out that I might miss. Like I didn't miss the fact that there's a little skin tug on the eyelids, but you've mentioned it, and that's a good thing. So present your work to its best. Yeah, this is neat. I like the fact that you've thought beyond just having a left and right. To have a controller for both, I think, is a smart move. An animator might want to be able to move both at once. And yes, they could select individual ones and move them in that manner individually. But I think it's much better to be able to work with something where you've got extra controls for these things and so on. I'm just going to go back to your eyelids. I perhaps would have had either having it so if you're going to have blinks, let's say, when you use both, it very slightly moves the bottom lid as well. Just a touch brings that up. It can just look read a little bit better on there. Or you could have had left up, right up, a lid, left lower lid, right lower lid, so you've got ultimate control over all the eyelids, top and the bottom, left and right. That's a possibility. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to these brows. Yeah, I like what you've got there. I like the fact that you've got a neutral position, which is not at the bottom. It's kind of somewhere near central, so you can bring the brows up and bring them down. Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, very, very good. Excellent. That's a nice one. Again, I think that's good as well. I mean, I'm just going to skip that back because I just want to you possibly just got a little bit too much pulling maybe in some of these areas here. I think if you just, I don't mind that there's a little bit there, because it can look like a little bit of a, a harder edge, so a little bit of a, a harder edge to maybe a muscle or a bit of sinew or something in the cheek. But I think perhaps it might be a little bit too much, perhaps. But I mean, that's nitpicking though, because it's very, very good. I do notice that when the mouth comes up, the top lip does kind of come down to meet the bottom lip, which again I think is pretty accurate. I'm not sure so much about the fact that the centre of the lip seems to really kind of come down to meet. I think it would be more the corners, the fall off, which would kind of come to meet. But that's, again, it's not awful. Pretty good. And I'm very pleased to see that you've got these individual kind of face poses as well, because that adds a lot of flexibility to your rig. Really pleased to see this. See, that's great because you're using the entire face. This is again a very flexible rig for a character. I'm pleased that you have over exaggerated them. Of the two that I've seen so far, the smile and the sad, I think the smile's excellent. I like that. Again, it's exaggerated, which is fine. The sad one I don't think is as successful. Just the shape of this mouth just doesn't read properly to me. I'm just not sure. It looks like it just narrows a little bit. I think it kind of pulls the corners perhaps a little bit. I'm not sure. I appreciate it's over exaggerated, so you could rein that in, but something just doesn't quite read to me. I think it's pulling the nose perhaps a little bit too much as well. Yeah, that's a neat one. That's scary. Yeah. So I like the fact you can layer them up. That's good. Okay. Just put that in here. Yeah, you got very good flexibility in your rig. I think. Well, I will say I think there's some that which are pushed way too far. But again, you're giving your animator that flexibility, so you could be forgiven for that. I mean, I asked you to do that kind of thing. I'm very pleased that you've done some of the subtle stuff, like the skin tugs on the eyelids and so on. I'm pleased that you did have the head controller. I think that's a really useful, powerful thing to be able to have. And the fact that in your rig, and I'm just going to jump back so we can see the rig system, you have got individual controllers. You've also got these kind of full expression controls as well. Again, it's a very flexible rig rather. Something you could hand over to an animator, and they're going to be very pleased to work with this. I think they'll have some good fun with it, and they'll find it a fairly efficient rig. So the last thing I wanted to look at was your PDF document. Now, I've had a proper look through this, so don't be thinking that me skimming through it now is my first look, because it's absolutely not. And I do think this is excellent. It's really, really good. Now, one of the key things I can tell before even looking at this, just from looking at your work in here, your animation work, your character rig work that I've seen in the Maya files, is it's very clear that you use visual reference. I don't hardly even need to look at this to know you use visual reference, because you've done a very good job of the rig. But you clearly have used visual reference, and you've done a very good job of it. Now, I'm pleased that you have looked beyond just the bone structure. You consider things like tendons and muscles as well, because those, of course, do determine the way, not just the way that things move and articulate, but the way that the skin behaves. The muscle mass is building and so on and so forth. I'm really pleased also that you considered things like, types of contractions, the way that muscles do work. The fact also, I think that, yeah, this chart here, I was really pleased with this, about the kind of joints that you've got, the way that they behave, because again, that will determine perhaps how there are maybe limitations to movement. So, a hinge joint is going to be much more limited than like a ball and socket joint, for example. I'm really pleased that you considered these things. Again, things like kind of flexion, kind of joint limits and things. Again, it's excellent. You've thought of those things, and you've implemented that into your environment. I'm really pleased again. I'm very pleased with this, aren't I? I'm very pleased again that you considered the detail element. Some people didn't bother to look at the specifics, the nuances of the hands and the fingers. You clearly have, and you put a lot of effort into that. So I'm pleased with that. Really good. Now I'm just going to skim through a little bit. Again, I like this stuff. The fact that you consider that there is some creasing. There is a little bit of a kind of almost like a meeting of the skin for the thigh and the calf and things. Also for the elbows. Around this area. Again, often what people will try and do is when they're putting together their skin in, they'll try and make it so perfect that the skin never touches, it never intersects. And you need a little bit of that, of course you need a bit of that. Further thing that pleases me is the fact that you bothered to look at other people's control systems. It did say that in the brief. It's something you should look at. Doing that means that you can, again, you can gauge what's gone before, you can see what's a successful rig, you can see what other people have done and how they've had their face articulating. If you find a good example of a rig, obviously it's something you can try and mimic. And I think you've tried to do that. Last few bits, I love all this facial stuff. Again, you've considered that yes, individual controllers are good, but you should supplement them perhaps with an entire control with a single slide for a facial expression, which is also excellent. The further material you've got in here, I think, is great. Looking at your development, it's great for me to see this because I get to see the way that you developed your character. Some of the hoops you've had to jump through. how you may have struggled with some of these expressions. You've tried one way, tried another, and one works better for you than perhaps the one that I've demoed and things. Again, that's all good stuff. This is a tricky thing to get right, particularly with the movement of this or the rotation of it. It can be tricky to get right. Now, one of the cool things about your PDF document here is that because you put this iterative development material in there, it means you can always come back to it. Should you want to rig a character again, and you might decide after this module never to rig a character again, it might have ruined you forever, but should you need to, you can come back to this document and you can see the way you did it before. That's a really powerful thing to have, Maybe years down the line you might come back and do some rigging again in mind. You can always refer to this document. Okay, so, again, I think this is an excellent document. I'm pleased that you've done things like before and afters. That proves to me that you had a go at it, saw that that was an issue, and you considered how to fix it. Again, excellent. See, so this is a better rotation. This before and after here, because you're rotating it via the clavicle, which again proves that you know what you're doing, which is good. Yep, again, some corrective morph type stuff. I'm glad you didn't leave it like that. Yeah, I mean, what pleases me is in reading this, I can see that you understand where things have gone wrong. So, for example, you saw that and you didn't go, "Oh, it's ruined. I can't do anything." You realise it's just a weight problem. The weighting of the influence is too heavily shared across different bones and things. You could see a fix. Yeah, this is a really good submission. This particularly, I think, is probably one of the best ones I've seen this time round, if not the best so far. I'm quite a way through the marking by now, so you can take that as a good sign. So this, I think, is excellent. I think the full figurative stuff, I'd like to have seen you got that foot roll to work. There's a few extra things you could have done on top of the things which were suggested, but that said, I still think you did a very, very good job of it. The facial stuff, I think, in parts is excellent. I think you've had a good go at it. I think perhaps maybe the facial expression stuff, you may have just done a little bit better with things like the shocked face. It just looked a little bit like it was too pushed, and yeah, you exaggerated. But I'd like to have seen you say, well, for example, in your demonstration, you could have said, if I, put the slider 80% of the way there, this is what I would deem to be like a normal shocked look. But if I can push it all the way to 100, you can see it's exaggerated. I'd like to be able to see that you could have pushed it towards a normal sort of face shape. But that said, I genuinely think that was actually still excellent. Okay, so this is actually a very, very successful submission, Harry. I'm really pleased with what you put together here. You are going to be getting a very good mark for this, and if not into the excellent area. So well done. Good work.